Okay. Test 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it sounds good.
Go ahead and do it again real quick.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, there's an echo.
I know there's an echo because there's. Test 1, 2, 3. That's good.
I'm gonna mute the soundboard.
Okay.
Good morning. I think everything sounds perfect.
Does, very good.
Good morning and welcome to today's genealogy program. It's March 11th. I'm Jessica Ashton coming at you from City Hall on behalf of the Royal Gorge Regional Museum and History Center. Today's topic is just Google it. But before we get into that, I want to make a few quick announcements. First, I wanted to just mention the fossil preparation that's happening at the museum. The preparators are continuing to come down on Fridays and Saturdays, and they're working during regular museum hours, 10 to 4. So if you haven't had a chance to come by and see that, please do. It's really neat. And then also coming up, we've got the annual senior mini college at Pueblo Community College is coming back. This will be the first time that they've hosted that since COVID-19 pandemic. And that's March 20th to 24th. I know that there was a lot of classes offered. I'm not sure where they are with the registration process, but if you haven't checked it out yet, please do. There's a lot going on. The classes are geared towards personal growth and lifelong learning. And one really cool thing I wanted to mention about that, this 36th year of the senior mini college is being dedicated to the late Carol McNew. Carol was a Fremont County historian who made such an impact in our area and is missed by so many. And so that's really neat that's being dedicated to her. So on to today's program. Just Google it. So Terry's going to tell us about specific features and tools that Google offers that can help us with our genealogy. Terri?
Thank you, Jessica, and good morning, everyone. And yes, let's just jump into Google. We tend to use Google as a search engine, and that is what its main purpose is. From a genealogy perspective, we tend to enter the names of our relatives or our ancestors, and perhaps we might look for an address or the town that our family might have lived in. And our results can vary. They can go from a single response to multiple thousands of responses, depending on how you enter and classify your search criteria. But Google can do so much more. And one of the things that it's pretty good at is helping you look for living descendants. Before we jump into Google and its features, I want to take a few moments to talk about developing your search criteria. As I mentioned, we tend to enter the names of relatives, addresses, or a subject matter, but there is so much more, and we need to think about expanding our thinking in that. Did one of your ancestors have an unusual occupation? Were they something like a sash blind maker or a stove mounter? What are these occupations? By doing a Google search, you potentially can find out what that occupation involved, and that will enhance your family story. If your people, like mine, were farmers, what were the farming practices in a given era? And by looking at Google and doing some Google searching on farming implements, farming practices with the particular state or a year called out, you might be able to find more information that would be relevant to your person. It may not specifically name your relative, but it will give you a better idea of what that person did and what they had to accomplish and what were the drawbacks in the different eras. They didn't have fertilizer at the time, what have you. If you have a relative that fought in the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, have you looked at the unit and gotten the unit history for that particular group? Here again, it may not mention your specific ancestor, but knowing where they were at a particular given time will help you to understand what kind of battle conditions were they in, or were they hospitalized? In World War I, did they ship overseas? And what did the ship look like that they went to war in? So there are also the world events, but there are also local events that might have impacted their lives. Was there a large plant, factory, industry in the town where they lived that your ancestor might have been involved in? Did that industry go out of business and therefore affect the economy of the particular community? Of course, there are the large scale things like the world wars. You know, what was the influence of that on your particular family? Were there brothers that went off to war? Did women sit at home and knit socks, roll bandages, that kind of thing? So hopefully some of these ideas will help you come up with new and different searches to put into Google that will lead to better information for you. So let's just jump in. Here's a typical Google screen, and we have put in Zoe Leda Tremblay's name. She was my great-grandmother. And we see several pictures of some young people, as well as an older person who is not my great-grandmother. But we do also see that we do find a couple of references that have Leda and or Zoe in them. Because we have not put any qualifiers on the search, it is going to yield 400,000 results. So we're going to talk in a minute about how to narrow down some of those results. I entered my grandparents' hometown. Here again, no qualifiers on the search engine. And we're looking at all of the results. And this time we've got well over 2 million results. Google does try to classify the results to put exactly what you're looking for as the #1 result. And after that, the results tend to be less precise. But one of the things that we sometimes fail to do is look at all the categories that might come up when entering a search. And I do recommend that you try all of these because you never know what you might crop up with. So if we look at maps, we see a picture and we get a picture of the town. And you can go in and look at various other things in these towns. But by looking at news, for example, we find the relatively current news from a week ago. You can also specify time periods for that news, and we'll go into that in a little bit. We look at images, and we see both pictures as well as maps and other kinds of images. From a genealogy perspective, we're really not interested in shopping, but you may take a look at the more just in case. If you enter a specific address, you might get the location of where that address might be, and you might actually get a picture. Is there a school that you might have attended or that an ancestor might have attended? Does it still exist? Do the addresses of your ancestors still exist? And is it possible that perhaps their house might still exist? So by going in and taking a look, we get to Google Earth. This is 108 Simmons Avenue. This was the house that my mother was born in and that my grandparents lived in from about 1915 until the 1980s. My uncle actually inherited the house and lived there until his death. Here again, you can focus in on the map. You can see what other buildings might be around, schools that might be in the area, parks, and get indications of what their life might have been like. So we're also going to talk about search operators. And these are things that are going to help to narrow down some of those 2 million or 400,000 results that you see. And we're going to go through each one of these to help you understand. If I'm going to pause at the moment, or I'll keep talking, but if you want to do a screenshot to get that web address, it will tell you, it's a complete article on how to use the various operators when using Google searches. So one of the first things is to add the plus sign to your search. And by adding the plus sign, you're going to get both names, but you also, there are no other qualifiers, it's just the plus. So you might also get things that may not be your relative. Because this does call out the specific search terms, it comes up first in the list. But there are others that have both the Trombley and the Joseph names in them, but they are not the related ones. So the plus sign can give you more information. When we put the quotation marks on the qualifier, then we see specifically Zoe, Leda, Trombley in each one of the results. So this is one that helps you to weed out all those extraneous names. You can use the plus sign and the quotation marks together. So if you put Zoe, Leda, Trombley in one set of quotes, plus a quote for Joseph Terrio, unquote, you will then get the results that you are looking for. The minus sign is another one of those, and it's going to eliminate certain search criteria. And this is part of that article that I recommended in the initial slide. So if you have a common name, for example, John Smith, and you want to eliminate the John Smiths that might have been from New York State, you put in a minus and put in New York. If you want to weed out those that might have been blacksmiths, put in the minus for blacksmiths. The minus is usually most helpful when doing a general category, for example, car manufacturing, and you might want to eliminate Detroit to see where other large car manufacturers might have been, or historical time frames. The star. If you have used Ancestry at all, I also recommend that you try to use the star or the asterisk in your searches there. The asterisk allows you to substitute other letters of the alphabet in those missing places. So I have put in quite a couple of stars here, and the only things that I have come up with is just the part that says the NIT. So it depends on what kind of name you are looking for. But this is also a very effective tool when doing your searches. The three dots, entering a year period. And I entered a very large year period separated by the 3 dots. What's going to happen is that any article that contains a year between these two will show up. So we have a 1912, we have an 1885. We do have names, but here again, we've got the 1912 and we've got the 1865. So using the dots, if you narrow the time frame, it will also narrow your results and perhaps help you hone in on exactly what you're looking for. If you are looking for a general category, for example, farming, and you want some time frame in the 1800s, put in like a 10-year or a 5-year gap, 1855 to 1860, prior to the Civil War, to see if you get information that way. So these operators are very, very helpful. Google also does have an advanced search, and many of the inputs that the advanced search menu asks for will help you to replace those operators. Here is the Google advanced search page. You type in all the words, or you want the exact word or phrase, or can come up with any of these. Or you want something with none of these words, that's the minus, and you've got your year ranges. The second half will allow you to specify languages, regions, the latest update on Google, etc. So the advanced search also can be very helpful in your research. Here's an example where I'm putting in all of these words. We want to find all of these words. I didn't put any other clarifiers on it. And we have Martin Boucher and genealogy, and we get those results. You can also get the articles in different languages if you have specified a different language. This happens to be in French. So those are some of the very high-level general things. Specifically in genealogy, we are interested in old books. Have you used the Scholar application within Google? And we also look at newspapers. The books are not only books, they may be pamphlets, they may be catalogs, they may be any of the written material that probably is out of print or out of copyright. In the Scholar, it's going to be papers that are held by universities and archives and will be scholarly articles. And of course, the newspaper archive, since they have taken over newspapers.com, it is an inactive site, essentially. They have left a lot of the newspapers that they originally did on the site, but they are no longer adding to those newspapers. So let's take a look. In Google Books, I typed in one of my relatives, Daniel Gunnan, and it turns out that he appears in a journal of the Board of Supervisors. This is a duplicate entry. We're seeing both the same citations for both. But we can actually go in and read. And we find on page 299 that Daniel Gunnan apparently was a marshal in at least 1878. This was information that I did not know. And apparently he had applied for some form of disbursement that was disallowed. We also see that it turns out that in doing this audit, he was one of the two auditors. Information I did not know. Just like I've mentioned, think of other search criteria. My grandfather was from Kakuna, Quebec. I didn't know, I have actually visited the town. It's really, really tiny. It is on the St. Lawrence Seaway. But in the 1870s, it was a booming pleasure location. They had boats that came from Montreal and Quebec City and went northeast on the St. Lawrence River. And there was this huge hotel. Unfortunately, my people were just farmers. They were not the ones that partook of this experience at the St. Lawrence Hall. And one of the other things that I found out in reading this article was eeling, harvesting of eels was very, very popular in the 1870s. And they still do have eel nets in the St. Lawrence River. Not to my taste. Google Scholar. I just happened to enter the general term genealogy, and you get articles that do not apply to what we think of as family history in them. But if there is an indication that a PDF file exists for the article, you can directly download that to your computer. So I made the term a little bit more general so that I could come up with family history and genealogy related articles. You will notice that there is no PDF for some of these articles. When encountering that, you're going to be taken to ERIC, which is the Education Resources Information Center. And it is, it's a subscription site, and you can request articles from them. These are articles, scholarly articles that do appear in journals, and they give the full citation so that you can contact them, request copies, etc. If you do want to download it, the computer asks you if you want to accept downloads. And if you say yes, then you will get the actual article that you can then read at your leisure. Google newspapers. These are just some. They are arranged in alphabetical order, as you will see. And I just chose one of these. You see the number of issues and the years that are covered. And you will notice that many of these are quite early in their production. I happen to choose the Acadian, and it just has one issue from 1819, and the remainder of the issues, the Acadian, you will see go up to 1929. So you'll see that they have decades called out here, and you would have to use the arrow to page through to get to a year that you might be interested in. But I was interested in particularly in the oldest of the newspapers. And it does allow you to go through and read each one of the pages. You can move the image so that it goes from the top to the bottom of the page. And if it's a multiple page article, you can page through that. Here is a result from the Boise City News in 1940. And we see that there are 6 pages, and it does allow you to page through, increase the size, decrease the size, and you can save the images. In our genealogy research, we are also interested in maps. And Google has at least 2, if not more, websites that allow you to look at maps and at the formation of the earth. If in going back to your ancestors, you find that some of your ancestors were immigrants from European countries, you might need the translation application. So we're going to take a look at each one of those categories as well. From the initial screen that we looked at, we did actually look at maps. But if we go specifically into the map application, my husband was stationed in Germany in the 1980s, and we lived in a small village called Reckershausen. From the maps, we see the outline of the town. And by zooming in, we can see the local swimming hole, and we can see a layout of the small village. And this is the street that we actually lived on, and this was the house that we actually lived in. This is a current map. When we lived there in the mid-1980s, this was an empty field. None of these houses existed. This was a sheep pasture. This road did not exist. It was a dirt road. So it's interesting to see the changes that have happened. You can actually get the image. So here's the street. We see the new street and the houses around it. So sometimes maps to show where your ancestors lived, even if you, and especially old maps, you can see the plots and the plines, and these photos will add to your ancestors' story. You can also type in, we live here in Canyon City. You can put in the thing, the current location, and you can see different historic things, different restaurants, etc. But look for those historic places. You have the opportunity to choose what types of images you perhaps want to investigate in a local community. Google Earth. There are 2 versions of Google Earth. This particular one, I was using an experimental version. They have a version now that is called Google Earth Pro, and it is a free download. It's an application that you store on your own computer, and it is much more friendly to use than the one that's actually on the computer. But going back to my grandparents' house, I entered that address information and I see the house. But with Google Earth, I can also go further down to look for things. I can go further out. This was the address where I grew up. You'll notice all the forested trees so that I could not actually see the house where I lived. But it allows you pretty much a 360-degree view of going in and looking at various addresses. I did a search. I did a listing of all the addresses that I had lived at and did an actual Google's Earth search for each one of those to see if I could get photographs of all of the places that I had lived at. Google Translate. This is just a partial list of the various languages that you can get and translate via Google. You have to type in the text, and then it will perform the translation. And it does the translation pretty much as you do the typing. And it goes both ways. If you want to enter it in English and translate it to another language, it will do that as well. Here is I'm reading the French. This is a burial record, and it translates the burial record in its entirety. This is very handy, especially if you can make out the lettering, even if you have to butcher the spelling, it will help you to get the context for your relative. We've already looked at pictures, but we're going to talk a little bit more about Google Images. Not only can you view and download them, but you have the ability to upload images as well. And images can include not only the pictures and the maps, but they may include postcards, other forms of pictorial information. So don't overlook images and don't be focused just on pictures. There may be other ephemera that fall into the image category. Did any of your relatives perhaps hold a patent? I never in a million years thought anyone did, but lo and behold, I found that someone in my family did hold a patent. And we're going to talk about Google videos a little bit. Here again, I encourage you to look at each one of the categories that Google allows you to see. We have just a set of images. We do get pictures as well as maps. And I happened to grow up in Ossining, New York, which was home of Sing Sing Prison. So I entered Sing Sing Prison and got these images. But by going a little further and clicking on that icon, I can choose the size of the image that I want to see. So if it's a large, high resolution photo, or if it's a lower, low resolution photo, you can specify and it will sort this information out for you. You can also choose, rather than color, you can choose black and white. And all of the black and white images show up. So look at the various categories that might be available for you. One of the things that you need to think about when dealing with Google Images is copyright. If you are going to use any of these pictures or the information in something that is going to be sold, you need to be very, very careful about copyright. The tools button will allow a comment to come up that has user rights on it. And within the user rights, it will specify whether the image is copyrighted or whether there's some form of common license, or whether there's a commercial license for the image. So when using these, if we're using them for our own personal genealogical information, it's perfectly good to download those. But if you plan to reuse them, put them out on the internet, and they are copyrighted, you should get permission from the person or organization that put them up on the internet initially. Google patents. I happened to find this by mistake prior to putting this presentation together. I had entered Benjamin R. Grace's name in a simple Google search, and it came up with a patent. When I actually tried to use the Google Patents search opportunity, I found that I had to put in the exact name, Benjamin R. middle initial Grace. I couldn't find it under Benjamin Grace. So hopefully you two on a regular Google search will luck out on it. But the patents application allows you to actually see the patent and the paperwork that went behind it. I never in a million years thought that this that anybody in my family held a patent, but least of all Benjamin Grace. He worked in a funeral parlor, and apparently he came up with some kind of damper adjusting attachment for oil burners. So perhaps they had a crematorium that he was experienced with. He was born in the mid or actually late 1800s. So here again, the fact that this is 1932 when he's applying for the patent was rather surprising. We can see the pictures, the images for the design that he came up with. And we can go in and look more carefully at those. This is Greek to me. And we also get the text for the actual patent. And what's interesting is that he shared 1/3 of it with his wife, who was Nora Cooney Grace, and 1/3 to his brother-in-law, Nora's brother, Maurice Cooney. Google videos. Google does have videos just on through the Google Videos website. But in 2006, Google actually took over YouTube. And I think we're all used to using YouTube. There are thousands of videos. And I actually saw a webinar that indicated that there are something like multiple, maybe 300, I forget the number, videos uploaded every minute on YouTube. But here again, You enter the category that you are interested in. Are you going to pursue genealogy research? Do you, and some of these happen to be very, very short, 2-minute, 3-minute videos. But if you are looking for hour-long tutorials in the genealogy repertoire, there are hundreds of them with specific topics. So if you're looking for death certificates or land records and how to use them, there are thousands of videos to help you along. When I mentioned earlier, finding living relatives, I did a DNA test and I received back DNA results. And these were some of my closest results. I do know that this person is a cousin. I do know that this person is a first cousin once removed. And I know that this person, even though there's no name, it is managed by Mark Terri, who is this gentleman. So I know the relationship for this person. But this person is someone entirely new and comes up as a second or third cousin. There were fosters by marriage in my family. One of my first cousins married a foster. So does this happen to be one of those people? One of the fortunate things was that Zachary is spelled a little bit differently. I would have expected a CH. So hopefully that will give me a clue. So I entered that information. I didn't put quotation marks around it. I just did the regular full. And I got Zach Foster. I did get Zachary with the CH. And further down in the results, I did get a Zachary Foster on Facebook. And I see a picture here. It means nothing to me. I do not know these people at all, and I'm trying to figure out the relationship if it does exist. Supposedly, it's a second or a third cousin. In looking on Facebook at his other friends, I see my first cousin and her husband. So I have confirmed that this indeed is someone in my family. My suspicion is that my cousin's sister married a foster, and I do believe that this is one of her grandchildren that would make him a first cousin twice removed. So there are ways to find living relatives thanks to Google. I'd like to also talk about Google Drive. I am not experienced with using Google Drive. I do not use it. However, it is a wonderful file storage system on the cloud. You do get 15 gigabytes free simply by creating an account. One of the advantages to this is that you can share these files. So when doing genealogical research, if you have a cousin that you are sharing information with, the Google Drive is a valuable tool for you. You can upload files, you can create files and folders, you can put documents, photos, any kind of information into those files. And it does synchronize these files across the devices that you might have. So you may have the information on your phone that would be synchronized. We've talked about the sharing, and there are other applications that it is compatible with. Excuse me. It allows you to create docs, sheets, and slides, which are particular to the Google application. Here is for an example for the Google Drive, and there is quick access. There are, for example, a number of folders that you can set up. And as I've mentioned with Google before, investigate every one of the opportunities and buttons that are there for you to select from. Some people use Google Drive for business, but in our particular case, we're more interested in using it for genealogy, and that storage and the sharing are the two main features that we would be most interested in. It does allow you to share stuff with others, and you can specify what level of sharing you want to do. The person can edit it, they can comment it, or they can just simply view it. Other applications that Google is compatible with, the Google Drive is compatible with. I'm not familiar with any of these, but I could see where drawings might be something that would be applicable in the genealogy aspect. Finally, we've only talked about those features of Google that, for the most part, are genealogy related. I do invite you to look at this listing because there are hundreds of Google products as well as capability. This list changes frequently. Products are added, and products, for example, like the newspapers, are discontinued. They may not disappear, but they are discontinued. And here is just a sample part of the listing for some of the things that Google allows you to do. So at this point, I will take it for any questions. And Dan is actually letting me know that there are not any questions this morning. I do want to add one little tidbit about Google. If you are really interested in pursuing Google and its attributes, Lisa Louise Cook has written, she is a genealogist who has a website, genealogygems.com, and has many, many videos for you to watch and learn from. But she has also written a book, The Genealogist's Google Toolbox. And she goes through many of the things that I have gone through this morning in it, as well as additional things. Her focus is on genealogy. So the book is related to that. One other thing, I need to back up for a second in terms of the Google Drive. There are advantages and disadvantages to the Google Drive. With the sharing application, you do have to keep in mind security. If perhaps you get the wrong person with the same name as the one you are actually trying to share with, you could potentially get hacked. They also limit the file sizes depending on the various apps that you use. The Google sizes are between 20 and 50 megabytes. In most cases in genealogy, we're not going to run up against those limits. They also limit the amount of information that you can upload in a single day. But here again, we're not using it for business. We're using it for genealogy purposes. So I doubt that we will run into that problem. I don't want to badmouth Google Drive in any way, shape, or form because the opportunities for cloud storage as well as the sharing are fabulous. So in conclusion, we'll advertise next month, second Saturday, April 8th, and we're going to look at causes of death. We know that our ancestors all died, but what did they die of? And we're going to try and find some of, since death certificates are pretty much from the 20th century forward, we're going to look at some of the older records and see where we might be able to find the causes of death. So with that, I wish you a happy month of genealogical research, and I thank you so much for joining us this morning.